In my mind, I'd say that the same hallowed work remains today, 140 years after they made that statement. I hope you all work to make sure that we can find a way to introduce democracy into the workplace in ways that it isn't known today. Thank you for your opportunity, and have a great May Day.
Thank you, John. Up next is Hank van Den Berg. He's professor of economics at UNL. He teaches the undergraduate and graduate courses in economic growth and development, as well as international economics. He's going to talk about the importance of the labor movement today in the struggle for social justice. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. I'm a bit of a contrast to the previous speaker. I'm rather new to the labor movement, but I hope I'm equally enthusiastic. In fact, I arrived at this through good reasoning and an examination of the evidence, and I'll present some of those ideas here as well. It's already been hinted at. The situation we find ourselves in today is really quite devastating. I teach a course in economic development, which is basically how economies evolve over time. I look at all the trends and the income levels and levels of welfare and how those things, again, change over time. And what we've been seeing in recent times is really kind of overwhelmingly devastating. It's been mentioned our wages have not risen in the last almost 40 years. It's really quite amazing that the minimum wage that I earned as a student back in 1967 working on campus was approximately 35% higher than is our minimum wage today. In real terms, think about that. 40 years, we've gone nowhere. If you look at growth in the last 25 years, a bit more actually, since the early 1980s, all of the growth that's occurred has accrued to less than 10% of our population. That is, over 90% of people have seen no growth in their income, their household income, or their wages. The only thing that's allowed us in any way to increase consumption has been to either dig into our savings, and our savings rate, of course, has gone down to nothing, so we're very insecure, or we've taken on 2-3 jobs. So again, the 40-hour work week has gone by the wayside, and we can claim, well, we're not much worse off than we used to be, but on the other hand, these are trends that are clearly not sustainable. We can't work 5 jobs, we can't work, 24 hours a day. It doesn't work. So somewhere along the way, we've lost something, and again, from what I teach, that has kind of convinced me that something is awry with our system. What's interesting in all this, of course, as an economist, you start looking at why did these things happen? Where are the motivations? What's causing this to occur? You look for incentives, and you keep coming back to the system that we have, plus essentially incredible, well, I can be extreme and call it a brainwashing that has led most people to simply accept the situation. This is the way it is, the way it's supposed to be. What can you do? The markets are working. Well, I always have to answer the questions of colleagues that start talking about markets. I say, where are all these markets? And I wait, and some of them will say, well, the farm sector still has a lot of farms and markets work there. I don't know if anybody's looked at the farm sector of late, but I don't think markets do terribly well there. We've got a few corporations pretty much running the show. What about industry? Well, I can't think of many industries where we have more than a couple of firms dominating, not just in our country, but worldwide. The labor market, oh yeah, that's a wonderful market. One person kind of goes beggingly up to the firm and asks for a job, and you're, on equal standing there, so you'll do very well, I'm sure. And if you complain, they threaten to take away your health insurance and you shut up. Those are wonderful markets as well. So that's a pretty large myth in terms of our situation. The myth continues with the idea that we have democracy, and I don't have to repeat some of the things that were just said. Our democracy of, one person, one vote is pretty much that. It's an entire myth, and recent Supreme Court decision should help that a lot. So that is likely to get worse. You look at those situations and you wonder, well, what do we do? How do we deal with this? And then we hear people talking about, well, everybody should be responsible for themselves. If we all do this or do that, we'll be better off. And that fits very nicely into another strong element of the myth that we live in, and that is that we are, in fact, fully in control of our own well-being. We forget that, human beings are social animals. We depend on each other. We all contribute. We depend on others to contribute. And that's really how the system works. And it's very nice to bring across this idea that we're all individuals entirely in control of our own lives, because it also allows us to criticize each other. And we do an awful lot of that. That if somebody fails, if somebody falls through the cracks, well, it must be because they're lazy, it must be because they're not very talented, there must be something wrong with them. And that really cuts into the ability to generate any kind of anger or reaction. We are so ready to fall back to blame ourselves, to look for our own little solutions. And that's important. I'm not saying, we should all be irresponsible and do whatever, but at the same time, we are in this together. And there's no way out of that. Which leads kind of to the idea, well, what do we do? And we see several reactions, not all of them terribly positive. One is to get angry. And, we see assorted teabaggers and other organizations running out and making a lot of noise. They have a good reason to be angry. I'm not, well, some of their reasons we won't talk about, but there are some solid reasons as to why they're dissatisfied. Their wages haven't gone up in 40 years, they're working 3 jobs, their family's falling apart, quite legitimate. But anger by itself is not going to solve the problem here, because they also are just essentially following their brainwashing, and that is they're blaming the lazy guy that isn't working, or whatever. There's always some scapegoat to find here. The Hispanic, we find all kinds of people that we can blame. The second solution is to basically blow something up, the violent reaction. That doesn't work terribly well. You don't accomplish a whole lot, and from what we've seen with the war on terror, that provides a wonderful excuse to crack down on anybody that opposes the system. So that's not a good solution. That leads to the third solution, which is to get angry and organize. That is solidarity, stick together. I don't see any other way to deal with this, and that very naturally leads you to the union movement. I don't see any other potentially, potent organization out there that can unify us in a productive way to confront the system that we have, the system of large transnational corporations that essentially dominate society. Not that there's necessarily a conspiracy there, but that's the way it is. They've grown, they have tremendous market power in the labor market and the product markets over us in many ways. How do we confront this other than through some kind of solidarity, through a powerful organization that we ourselves are going to have to build? And that's why I've joined the union. Probably the only person on UNL campus, which is not a union campus, that actually pays union dues at this point, but I do so very proudly, just to make a point. And hopefully we can extend that movement and gradually, join each other, because it's going to take a tremendous effort to counter the almost overwhelming economic power of the large corporations, the large financial interests. It's going to take solidarity. It's going to take people working together. Now, we have that power because the system can't work without labor. It can't work without workers. And so we can simply threaten to withdraw that if possible. We have power if we work together as a group. And also, as we've heard from the history of the labor movement, we've done this before. We got the 40-hour week. We got the 8-hour day. So there's a track record there for unions, and I think that's the way to go, and that's kind of how I arrived at this point as to where the solution lies. So we can get angry, we can scream a lot, or again, we can organize. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Hank. Up next is Andrew Losh. Also a comrade of mine and co-founder of the LUNk Collective. He's going to talk about the need to organize as a class. Welcome, Andrew Losh.
Thank you, Brian. Today we're here to support working class people. That's what I've said to the people that I've invited. Supporting working class people isn't just an event. It's a way of life. It's a commitment that we make. Who are working class people? We're the people that sell our labor, our time to support our families, and simply to live. Growing up, we're told that we can choose where to work, we can be what we want. Well, here's a reality check. Most of us have to take the work we can get. Choosing your master generally seems to be to be between Boss A and Boss B. We can only hope that Boss B is a better option. How many working class people are allowed